Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Tien, and I'm delighted to welcome you today to another instance of our very own Kathy's Corner. This special series has been a cornerstone to Project Kin since day one, and I'm thrilled to have my very dear friend Kathy Stone carry this forward as an ongoing series that really speaks to one of the key challenges that every family historian and genealogist has to deal with: the stuff that we've inherited, the beloved memorabilia, letters, documents, and even the humble postcard. It was in the conversation about the humble postcard last holiday season that we had a number of speakers talk about the kinds of things that they remembered from these postcards. And it was an incredible session. And since then, we've picked up on a lot of those ideas coming into it. So this week, in a special introduction to the whole RootsTech series, we will cover a little discussion about preserving and protecting those artifacts, and perhaps how that leans into the whole RootsTech season. So go ahead, take it away, Kathy.
Thanks, Barbara. Yeah, going back to the session in December, if you haven't watched that recording, I highly encourage you to watch it, because it wasn't me talking. Other people, we had guests the whole time. I did not talk about anything technical. They showed their postcards, told their stories, and if you have any connection whatsoever with postcards, please go back, and I know Barbara will have the link in the comments, and go back and watch that, because it was truly, I think, one, if not the very best Kathy's Corner so far, because the stories were incredible. The whole thing with postcards was fascinating, and I learned so much in the process of doing that. Just from the people who were presenting and comments that were made. Just for postcard collecting is something I read is it's the third biggest hobby in North America, is collecting postcards, which kind of blew me away, I have to say, because there's a lot of hobbies. But I don't own that to say that's the truth, but I did read that in one of the articles I was reading about postcards. And if you collect and study postcards, you're called a delta. I pronounced it, practiced a whole bunch of times, now I can't say it. Deltaologist. That is the study of postcards, which is quite fascinating that, in fact, it has its own name, separate from genealogy or any family history. We looked there, we found out about real photo postcards, which is what inspired me to do that session on postcards, when I read something about someone who was asking in another group, not a genealogy group, because we don't like to throw anything away, but in another group where someone said, I found their postcards and just have these printed images on them. Should I just toss them? And I went, oh, please, no. So we learned all about their real photo postcards, which were a big thing. In the early development of postcards, we learned about exaggerated photo postcards. My cousin had one in her collection that was where people took, like, it was a picture of a wagon with apples that were as big as the wagon in the back. And those they're another genre called exaggerated photo postcards. Historical events, art, travel, buildings, objects. And we had Paula Collins had a large collection that her dad was a pilot, and he collected pictures of postcards of airplanes. So there was a whole bunch of different ones, and even leather postcards, which my cousin Jamie also had in her collection. And she did some research on it, and those links are in today's resource sheet too, as well as in the article back from then. So there's lots of links for talking specifically about postcards in the December 4th Kathy's Corner. So you can check that out. And I've just decided postcards really are a rabbit hole. And I found two more. I finally found my collection in this nasty bin I just found yesterday of a whole ton of stuff mixed together, which is another, I need to sort through that. But this is a postcard, and it's from, let's get it up the right way, Victoria, British Columbia, and it's a package of seeds.
Oh,
Can you hear it?
Oh,
It is actually a package of flower seeds, and it's called a flower seed postcard. The other one I pulled out because I said we could go down the rabbit hole and talk all about postcards for the whole hour here was this one. And I have one of this like Mickey Mouse. It's a Statue of Liberty, but it's
3D.
multicolored depending on how you move it. And I have another one in there like that of Mickey Mouse. So I was like, okay, we can't go down that rabbit hole. Put the postcards away and put that box away. But remember, you got more work to do because that's a mishmash of stuff in that box. So, but in it is quite interesting because there's a bunch of stuff in there that are, is a album of all the certificates and things like that that I got when I was in school. My report cards are in there. There's a lot of stuff in there. There's all the greeting cards that I think were my mom's when she passed that I now have in there, all tons of greeting cards. And we've never really talked about archiving this archival storage of this type of things. We've talked a lot about photos, and we know all about PhotoSafe and how we should preserve our photos, but we haven't really talked much about all that other stuff. And we're talking now about more like paper, and we're not talking about digital. We're talking totally about all the physical stuff, which I think for genealogists you have a lot of too. And it's sort of how do we preserve that and decide what to preserve? So we're going to talk about organizing and archiving this type of stuff today. And then there's also newspapers. Who doesn't have a collection of articles from 9/11 that you cut out of the newspaper when that happened? Maybe you've got a whole pile of COVID ones. I have one here, and remember what it looks like. So this is the whole front page of the city to the north in Alberta. This is the Edmonton Journal
Mm.
on what has now become called Black Friday in Edmonton. And is this going to be upside down? No, it's not. And it was a massive tornado that hit. It was I think an F5 or an F6. It was a very large tornado that hit
Mm.
Edmonton, and many more would have been killed if it wasn't for the fact that it was on a Friday afternoon of a long weekend, and it had torn through a industrial area where that destroyed a lot of things there, but a lot of the staff had been sent home at lunchtime because it was a long weekend. And so, but I've saved that, and it's the whole newspaper talking about that story. But as you can tell, it's big, it's bulky, and you can pretty well see how yellow it's getting. And I fold it in half, which wasn't the best plan, but newspapers, but it's yellowing. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about, are those kind of things that fit into that category of non-photo, but still made out of paper. Artwork is another thing. And I don't mean nice, fancy artwork that you hang on your wall. I'm thinking more of kids' artwork that we have to have collected. I've got bin loads of my kids. I mentioned before, I have a box of my stuff from kindergarten that my mom saved that someday I have to venture in the basement and have a look at that. And I will make this comment because we're going to talk later. My basement is a heated walkout. It's not it's like, it's ground level, not dug into the ground. Just going to make that point because that's important when I tell you there's things in my basement. So, um, when we talk about archiving all this type of paper and our postcards and things, we talk about what degree are we happy with? Do we want to go to the level of museum archiving? That's a whole different ballpark or scope. Or do we want to just get our stuff put away and saved so we're not damaging it or losing it through deterioration? And that's not a either or, that's kind of on a scale. And you need to decide sort of what am I happy enough with that, and I go more to I'm happy enough if it's not going to deteriorate, if it's something I want to save, than whether I'm following the specific guidelines that need to be followed in order for it to be a museum piece. That's sort of, and I drift back and forth because some things, and I may have to change my scale as time passes because I always looked at the pictures from like the 70s and 80s as not being that old, but apparently they're like 50 years old or something now. So I may have to take a different view of those photos now too when I look at archiving things because they are getting older. So what, for me, and this is me personally, and it's only because in my background as a photo manager at many photo conferences, I encountered a company called Archival Methods, which is out of Rochester, New York, which is also where Kodak came from. And they have, not only do they have fantastic products, they have incredible resources and blogs. They're my go-to when I'm looking up information on storage. And I met, I believe she's now the president of the company, and other people from the company. I met them. Archival Methods was the sponsor for one of my sessions I did at the photo managers. So kind of established a bond with them. And even though it's expensive to ship to other countries, as a member of the photo managers, they're one of the partners, and I got a discount, so it made up for the cost. But just a little background: I don't work for them. I don't get anything from promoting them, but I just think I like to talk about a wonderful company that's just, they're not a big conglomerate. They're just this company in Rochester, New York, which I noticed Bill nodding when I mentioned Rochester. It's kind of famous in the photo world. Kodak, I think, came out of Rochester.
Yeah.
And we'll talk a little.
Xerox.
Sorry?
Xerox
Xerox,
also
yeah. So it's
also came
kind
out
of
here.
in that it's sort of like the Eastern photo tech world over there. So,
Yeah.
oh, Bill lives in Rochester. Well, there,
Yes.
why am I telling you all about Rochester? And I think the Kodak Museum is there. And something else I'll talk about in a bit is Rochester, the Institute of Technology. It comes up a
We're
bit
yeah.
later. So,
Uh, that's
um,
that's like
yes,
down the street from me.
RIT.
We're actually Kathy, you might be interested in this. Our society is talking to the Eastman Museum about possibly digitizing some of the printed materials they have. They have a collection of photography studio ledgers
Oh, wow. Yeah.
that is that has never been digitized. It's all on paper, and we're in discussions with them about possibly taking that on as a project.
Oh, that would be very, very cool
Yeah,
and good to have it digitized.
yeah.
Um, so that's why you'll see a lot in the resources, a lot of links to articles on the blog of Archival Methods, just because it is so good and they explain things so well and give recommendations for products. And doesn't mean you have to buy the products from them, but it gives you an idea of what you're looking for so you can check local sources or source other sources within your country there where we aren't dealing with the incredible cost of shipping things all over the world. But that's why why you'll see a whole bunch of links to archival methods. I've also included two locations for Canadians, and I apologize, Jane and Jennifer, I haven't looked up any for Europe or New Zealand or Australia area yet, but we can probably do that. I listed a couple sources where Carmaclean in Canada, and they haven't unfortunately got all the blog and all the information, but they do sell archival products and have quite an extensive collection. And the other one is that I'm familiar with, and there might be some in other provinces, but is the Alberta Provincial Archives have a shop where they sell archival storage things too. A very limited, these are much more limited than archival methods, but they're still for the main stuff where you could get the basics and things. So, what else did I want? Okay, well, we'll stay on this. So, um, the just because we're going to refer back to these, I want to talk briefly about the Image Permanence Institute and PAT, or the Photographic Activity Test. So the Image Permanence Institute is a technical organization that certifies items as being archival and photo safe. And the PAT is a distinguish a specific test to see if any materials are going to react with photos, and particularly print photos with the old gelatin base from development. But now they're testing other products now as well, because a company can submit their products to the Image Permanent Institute for the photographic activity test. And that leads to There is an international standards organization, or the ISO. Yeah, it's the Image Permanence is part of Rochester Institute of Technology in Rochester too. There is an ISO for archival and photo safe products. And so having the studies done by Image Permanence gives that certification. And if something has that certification on it, you know it's archival safe quality. If it doesn't, and it just says it's acid free or it's lignin-free or photo safe, be wary of, because unfortunately there's no world body that regulates those claims. And so just be wary about it, because there's a lot of things that are actually not photo safe, and terms get thrown around. It's much like the term fat free. There's a lot of stuff promoted as being acid free because we're all kind of familiar with that now, that never would have had acid in it in the first place. So it's like, great, it's acid free, but it's got other stuff in it that isn't good for the photos. So that's what I like, looking for that symbol. And you'll see I should have copied this, but I have this tape. Ooh, I've got in the middle here. And it actually has I found it earlier. So it's right in that green dot on it is the PAT symbol. So it's been tested. It's a tape I've used to repair torn documents. Because I've discovered, as I've mentioned before, and I'm going to mention again, Scotch tape, not a good thing to put on anything you're going to keep for any length of time. And I say that as Scotch tape in general. Yeah, that'll be another one, Barbara, I think, that's got a PAT symbol on it. I recognize the color of that box. So it's I just wanted to clarify, so then I'll use PAT, and so I don't have to keep repeating photographic activity test over and over again. So just those are two things to look out for when you're looking for archival material. So 3 areas of things that can cause damage to photos or other paper products, or even the paper products themselves. The things that can damage those items, including our postcards. And the first one is adhesives. The second one is plastic. And the last one we'll talk about is paper. And so adhesives can cause yellowing and breakdown of whatever they're stuck to over time. They can physically damage the item. And I think the best example would be the photo manager's nightmare, the a magnetic album. And I'm sure you all know what I speak of. They were very popular around the 50s and 60s, and you bought a photo album. It was usually bound with a metal coil, and the pages were sticky, so you could move your photos around instead of adhering them. And then it had a plastic cover over it. And Barbara's got one. I have one. I've digitized mine and taken them apart. Those are, show the inside. Those are not photo safe. And there are some people who make them now who claim they're photo safe, but again, I would make sure they have that ISO or the PAT standard on it. And so, Barbara, that's a classic example. You could see those pages were probably white to begin with, and they're now yellow. And so they're yellowing, and if the pages are yellowing under the photos, it's destroying the photos as well. And so there's 2 things going on there. The paper that obviously has lignin in it, which is it's a plant substance. I'll talk about it a bit further later in it. And that's what causes the yellowing. It's what causes the yellowing in so much. There can be deterioration of the photos themselves, fading, even though they're an album and closed, they shouldn't be fading, and discoloration. If it's turning the hue, I can even see it from here, getting kind of an orange hue on things. The other thing I've seen with it is where the glue has actually working its way through the image, and you can see the lines of the adhesive, because they had little straight lines of adhesive on the back, is now part of the image, and it's extremely hard to edit out even in digital. So if you have those, I would take them apart. And we talked about that in a different Kathy's Corner about how to get the photos out of those. But first recommendation is those are not good for the photos in them. And they're just, and for many reasons.
It's a guilt album for me.
It's a guilt album, yes. Yeah. I only took mine apart last year, Barbara, so don't feel bad. And again, some of the things I've checked out, the little photo corners in really old albums were one of the safer things that they made because minimal amounts touched the picture. Well, so if you know the old little sticky photo corners were one of the safer things because they weren't actually much like the magnetic stuck right to the photo or Scotch tape. I've gone on at great detail about my nightmare of my Scotch taped albums, and I just discovered apparently I had a lot of Scotch tape in my house when I grew up because that album I have of all my certificates from school are all Scotch taped into this black album, and the tape is falling out, but it's leaving lovely yellowed marks all over my documents. So not a good thing. Rubber cement was used a lot, particularly in scrapbooking. And it wasn't that it's bad for the photos, but it tends to dry up and the photos fall out. So it was, but again, with adhesives, look for PAT certified, a PAT approved, or that ISO on them, that it's a quality adhesive. And there's a lot that it's not hard to find them on the market. It's big in the scrapbooking industry, and Barbara and I both have like that tape I showed you that I use to tape documents that are torn is photo safe and approved. So
This is
adhesives.
actually, sorry to interrupt. This is just, it is actually artists' materials, which is often an overlap from a market
Yes.
perspective because artists are making materials. Yeah, God.
Yes. So plastics. So remember I was talking about things are marked as acid free that never had acid in them. Plastics is one of them. In the magnetic albums, the acid is in the paper underneath, and it's getting in on just deteriorating the photos by leaching through the paper. The plastic on top isn't that it has acid in it. However, certain types of plastics aren't stable and they're not inert. They off gas, they deteriorate, and it's particularly polyvinyl chloride or vinyl type of plastics are not stable. And the gases they give off can damage whatever they're preserving. So even if you're preserving paper, which has some of its own limitations, you don't want to put plastic covers on it that aren't safe. And there's a lot of those out on the market too. And again, you're looking for the PAT or ISO certification on them to know that you're using them. You can also find it quite easily because the ones that are safe are polyester or mylar, which apparently are the same thing. I didn't research that far enough into there because my mind went to mylar balloons right away. But polypropylene and polyethylene are all safe, inert, and stable plastics. So that's what we're looking for in our sleeves, bags, whatever we want to store items in. And again, the archival supply stores have these made out of the proper plastics. So we're kind of looking for that so that we're not using plastics that are further deteriorating our items or our postcards or letters. And I know we talked about business cards, and that's another thing that, again, none of those were made on, those do not come on photosafe paper. Which leads into the paper. And so it applies to the items in themselves, but also what we store them in. And so the shoebox, the famous shoebox, it's not made out of photosafe paper. It's obviously they don't put a lot of money into shoeboxes, so the old shoebox can actually be harming our photos. Better than many other things we can keep it in, but still it's not a good permanent location for anything. All paper products contain acid that's added in the process of, because paper comes from trees and wood and all that. Acid is used in the process, particularly bleaching processes, adds acid into the paper. Lignin is a plant product that is also in paper because when we flatten out wood, we grind up wood pulp to make paper, and the lignin stays in the paper unless it's removed. So the lignin is what's causing, and newspapers are the best example. The yellowing is something with a really high lignin content because as it is exposed to light, as it ages, it turns yellow and gets very brittle. If you've ever, I have in my client's collection, we have a newspaper article that's like pretty much fairly large, the whole page, and from 1906, and it's yellowed and it's so brittle that you can hardly touch it. Like we had to be so careful to get it scanned because if you barely touch it and another piece falls off. Like it's really disintegrated. And old books were made, if you've got old books and they're turning yellow, that's again because of the lignin. The acid that's in paper can leach out of the paper and into other items it comes in contact with, which is where when we're storing our where we want to store the paper items we're trying to keep, be they our postcards, our letters, our certificates, all those things, we need to be careful of what we store them in for two reasons. One, if they're stored by our photos, which not necessarily apply, I think you say, oh, never put them by your photos, but you don't want them, you want them the photos protected and the document protected. And you also want the documents protected because of all these things in them, they deteriorate. It's just the reality of it that and there's an article there on acid free. I think there's one from Gaylord Archives, which is another big archiving company in the US. And they've got some good information articles on their website too that we put some links into. But if you have those, they have good detailed explanations if you want to know more about lignin and acid and paper and all that stuff. But long story short is protect it from other things and protect your things from paper that's got those substances in it. There are certain pH levels that qualify as them referring to something acid free, and then a certain amount of, I think lignin, it can have less than 1% of lignin left in the paper before they can say it's lignin free. So, but that again, if that fascinates you, check out some of the references. I won't go on and on that today. It's just very important to not have those touching our photos or even touching each other for that matter, because again, the acid can migrate and do damage. Okay, I already talked about that. So you can get acid-free and lignin-free papers, file folders, envelopes. You can also get plastic sleeves that are the proper kind of plastic to put things in to stop further deterioration. And it's essentially an isolation thing. You can also get paper that's buffered, and buffered they use. Should have written the chemical down. Calcium something, not the vitamin one, but some other one. They use that to buffer the paper, which prevents the leaching process from happening. It creates an inert surface for it, which it's largely used for scrapbooks and things where people are actually putting their photos right in a scrapbook album. Tissues, sleeves, where you keep your stuff is important too. And this is where there's a really good article in the resources called Agents of Deterioration, which I love the title. And apparently it was from the Canadian Conservation Institute, quoted in Archival Methods blog about what things are bad for our photos, papers, and everything else. And so one of them we kind of know, light accelerates the breakdown of anything that contains lignin and acid, and also fluorescent lighting. So if you've got fluorescent lighting in there, and that article talks in detail about what kind of lights aren't good, but generally light is not good. And I've used the example before. I should have taken a picture of it, but I've already fixed it for the individual, where if you used to go to places like Walmart, and here it was Zellers or Kresge's or the old Woolworths, those sort of stores that sold a lot of stuff, they used to sell, it would be a big picture frame with a paper mat that wasn't acid free and was made out of paper with little ovals cut out, and you taped probably with Scotch tape, you taped your photos to the back and put it in the frame and hung it on the wall, and so it looked like they'd all been matted. Apparently Barbara has one she's pointing at there too. So what that produced is somebody brought me one and said, "Can you do anything about these photos?" And so the amount of light damage was so obvious once you took the piece of paper off, because there is a immaculately preserved photo that didn't hit light and probably not old enough yet to have been wrecked by the paper touching it. And then in the middle, in a shape, was faded till you could hardly read it. Someone else contacted me the other day and they've got a certificate that they were given that's been hanging on the wall. It was some kind of their doctorate or something. And it has faded so bad you can hardly read the writing on it anymore. Like the signatures and the things are so faded that you can't read them anymore. Those things are quite hard to, particularly the photos. The photos were very hard to color correct with. I'm thinking we do better now with better technology than when I worked on it back then, but and AI and things, but it's hanging things up. You got to watch how much light they're in. The other big one for me is humidity, which Linda and I don't really have a huge problem with that here in Calgary because we live in a dry land. Or if you live in New Mexico, it was even drier there than Calgary. But most places you have humidity, and humidity is really bad. Causes mold, corrosion. I've opened things up that have been exposed to humidity that had paper clips and staples in them where the paper clips and the staples have rusted and left rust marks on the papers. And so what we did with those is, because some of them they needed to be kept together, either put them in a folder together, or also I got some plastic, again probably not photo safe, but it wasn't at least going to rust and leave more marks on the document. So better not to use anything like a fastener like that, because again, but the potential for corrosion and also just physical damage humidity. I saw there's a picture in the article I'm talking about. There's a picture where the negatives were in sleeves, and they might have been like the sheets where you could put all the strips of negatives in them, and got exposed to humidity, and the negatives deteriorated. Not mold, there's no mold, but they deteriorated and stuck to the sleeve. And so they are almost like they have become one, and makes it extremely hard then to digitize or do anything with them because you're going to damage them trying to get them out of there. So humidity, generally, your things like to live where you do, which means not in the basements, not in attics. If you live in somewhere with a lot of humidity, desiccant packages, you can get those from the archival suppliers. Put the desiccant packages in there. We moved my mother-in-law. She lived in Stratford, Pennsylvania forever in my husband's childhood home, and we moved her to a lodge in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, in Amish country, and she had a lot of stuff. We moved her out of a two-story house with a basement into a one-bedroom cottage. And so we had to rent several storage units. And so my husband and his brother did all the moving. And when I went down there to help them with cleaning out, emptying out the storage units, I, of course, gravitated towards dealing with the photos. And there was a lot of damage from mold that probably wasn't there even when it went into the storage unit. But their storage units were below ground level would be the best way. I wouldn't even go so far as saying it was a basement. And we have basement definition is different depending on where you live. But here where I live, our basements are poured concrete foundations to our homes. So it's not like crawl spaces or anything. My grandparents had a dirt basement. And so it just depends on what it is. But this was literally not very, and it was really, as soon as you walked in, you could smell the mold growing in it, like knocked you right off your feet before you even opened anything. But it's just humidity and photos don't get along well. Cooler is better, temperature wise. Heat accelerates deterioration, which is why attics aren't a good choice either, because often the attic is very hot. So kind of need to put them where you are, or have a controlled environment for them where you can, dehumidifiers. That was a strange concept to me when I first moved to Eastern Canada, that one would need a dehumidifier. Coming from where we have humidifiers here, that we try and put a little moisture into our air, but something that regulates. And in that article, they give you temperature ranges and humidity percentages and stuff too. So temperature, where there's, Barbara?
A question about I spent a lot of my life in very warm tropics, and including cleaning out a garage, an attic of completely deteriorated materials.
Mhm.
But foxing, is foxing a kind of mold? Foxing on
No,
paper? What is
I just
foxing?
read an article about that. Foxing isn't a type of mold, but it is a type of it's not a mold where get the mask out and wear it, but it
Uh-huh.
is a deterioration caused by too much humidity. And that's kind of a discoloration.
Right. I have artifacts that have that, and I was
Yeah.
concerned about arresting it. Is it an organic material? Do I need to take it somewhere to have it be arrested? Or if I keep it in its dry, light, no light area, is it all
Yeah.
right?
It's probably, if it's truly foxing and not mold, you're fine because foxing is not an organic compound.
Okay, good.
It's a different type of deterioration that happens to photos.
Okay.
And I'll dig some links up with some examples or pictures so people can see what it
Yeah.
looks like.
Yeah. Thank you. We're going through my closet of guilt.
Your
So
guilt phase, yes. And again, as we talked about a lot in September in Kathy's Corner about mold, the minute you think something has mold, get the mask on, gloves on, protect your eyes, and put that stuff. And then we don't worry about whether it's photo-safe plastic or not. We just get it in isolated because mold is really bad. Mold causes bad diseases and bad for you. So, and then in September we did talk about what could be done with stuff that is moldy, but it's you don't want to mess around with mold. So yeah, Anne and I have talked about her moldy materials. Yeah. The other thing that's mentioned in that article are pollutants, gases, sprays, solids that can react chemically with the papers or whatever you're storing. And you could also transfer stuff, and pollutants is used not in the world of it doesn't have to mean it's pollution, but things like if you touch something and you have oils on your hand or you just put hand cream on, you might transfer that to the photo. So when I first started, we were wearing cotton gloves. When I first started doing this years ago, we had to have cotton gloves on. And then we realized that, man, does that cotton put a lot of dust on your photos? And you have to clean them because they're dusty. And so we've switched to nitrile gloves or actually using just not like using your hands, but washing them frequently and just making sure you're not eating you're not eating a bag of chips while you're dealing with your archives and stuff, but keeping clean hands. And nitrile gloves can get a little uncomfortable after a while. Sometimes we'll just use like the finger cots. So it's just covering the part your fingers and thumbs that are actually touching the photo. So, and then I'm not going to go into one. They had several of theirs were all I've lumped all together as disasters that can happen, and that would be your floods, fire, earthquakes, theft, etc. And kind of my answer to most of that is where digitization comes in because it gives us another copy besides the original that is safe from those things. So, and the tragedy to lose the only original copy of something is significant. So that's where we do the digitization. So, okay, so that's any questions about archiving or archival storage? I'm going to talk a little bit now about organizing if we have no questions. I'm guessing Barbara's not going to, there's none in chat because Barbara's not coming off mute. So if you have any, pop them in the chat or we'll talk about them because this isn't going to take very long. I am almost through this here. So I like a certain number of questions, 3 questions, 3 this, 3 that, 8 steps. So there's 3 questions to talk about how you want to organize. The first one is, am I just trying to store it? Because if I'm just trying to store it, we've talked about all those different things already that are archival. You get archival material. It's going to be acid-free, lignin-free, photo-safe, plastics. So I did what you've seen this picture because this is my most recent find, but I've now put it in one of those. It's a 5x7 photo sleeve. It's polyethylene, polypropylene, one of the two. And it's just essentially protecting this photo that I still haven't decided what I want it, where I'm going to put it or where it's going to go. So it's just sitting on my desk because when I figured out that the little girl in the front was my grandmother, when I found this photo, I was just so thrilled because we don't have a lot of photos of my ancestors when they were young. So it's just slide, and it's just a slide in sleeve, open at both ends. There, it's very hard to see, but that's what it looks like. And it just protects the photo from anything else, protects it from whatever else it's leaning against on my desk right now. When it gets put in its proper storage thing, it'll protect it from everything else, and it just stops. If I touch it now, there goes, sorry. Just have to, my camera, after a while, it gets tired and blurs. It's just to protect that photo. And I'm using them a lot. I use a lot of those sleeves for older photos. And as I've said, I've got to start thinking about how old is old now, because my definition of what was old is has to start changing. But just to be safe, and again, it depends on are we going to look at these all the time, or are they just going to mostly be saved in the box? Sort of, and they'll be scanned, of course. Like that would be sorry, a given. See, I talk about mold and then my cough comes back. It's a question of what's going to happen to them eventually, but if they're just going to be stored until future generations decide what to do with them, they're all digitized if we want to look at them. The next question is, do I want to display something? Like, do I want my my diploma hung on the wall? And so my husband wanted his university degree hung on the wall. And so the university offered a matting service for it, which was archival matting. And so we got him that, and now he can hang his on the wall. Mine is in that nasty box I just found behind me in a plastic folder that the university gave it to me. And so I'm pretty sure it's not photo-safe plastic, but I'm like, I don't have any great desire to hang it on the wall, but you may have other things that you want to hang on the wall. And what's important there is the light is the biggest danger, because again, as we talked about how harmful light is, particularly to items that aren't photographs. Even photographs deteriorate with light, but we're not accelerating the lignin destruction in it. So either keep it out of direct sunlight. If you're hanging things on the wall, keep them out of direct sunlight, or get them framed with UV filtering glass, which is usually done through a professional framer, or display a copy, not the original. And that's probably the best solution, is to not put the originals on the walls, because it's just once they're digitized, print a copy and put that on the wall, and then you can replace it as it deteriorates. So now we've been talking around it, but back to postcards. So what if you have something that you want to look at all the time? And like if you've got a pile of postcards, what fun is there in not ever looking at them? And I noticed after we did that talk, a lot of people said, oh, I think I saw Kyla here. I think she's probably run off again. What she's done is she said, oh, after that talk, I went and found my postcards, and now I'm digitizing them because it's neat. They're cool to look at. So for items you want to look at, store in clear sleeves. And these sleeves that I showed you, which I now can't find on my desk, they come in a whole variety of sizes, from little tiny ones for like the old school portrait size, or old photo size that were about 2x3s, all the way up to, you can get them in like 20 by 30 things for great big documents and stuff. So there's a wide range of size. So you can get those sleeves to put almost anything in. They're clear. You can look at both front and back. For something, and they minimize the handling by your fingers and the touching. Like if it's something that people are going to look at, it protects it from the kid with the chocolate on his hands and all that stuff too. If you're going to you want to store the clear sleeves in archival binders or boxes. There are binders made specifically for postcards, believe it or not, so they're the right size. but they'll have like a set of pocket sleeves that are archival quality, mind you, but that you can put the postcards in and still look at the front and the back. My cousin's collection are in albums, but they're very, very old albums. It's just a wonderful collection that she inherited from a family member. But they are actually, the album was designed with little, it's the black, like the kind of black paper, the old photo albums, but they're little slits cut the size of postcards, and you slip the postcard in there. But the only way you can look at the back is to take the postcard out. And then you're running the risk, the handling, and again, that paper is getting fragile because it's like from the early 1900s, late 1800s. It will easily tear when you're taking out or putting back in, and you're handling the material a lot. So I think moving into some kind of a archival binder or a box with sleeves in it still allows you to look at things and without handling them too much. One of my clients has a set of letters that my client's mother and father, they courted for, because it was back in the 1920s, they courted for 4 months before they got married, and they were apart. They had met and then they were apart, and they wrote letters to each other every day. And the letters in the envelopes were all saved. So what I've done with those is each letter is in its own sleeve, and then the letters are all inside an archival box together. And now what I'm going to do for her to be even more ease of looking at it, I'm going to make them into an album. I'll take the digital scans and just make a digital album out of them. And I'll probably just do it. I haven't decided yet whether I'll make a hardcover or just a soft cover album, but just something that makes it easy for people to say, hey, do you want to read Grandma and Grandpa's letters? Because they're wonderful. Like it's wonderful, and it should be read. It should be looked at. So that's helpful. Or I could have got them into a binder that was with two-sided sleeves, so that you also need to block, like with letters, they were written on, like, I think they called it onion skin back in the day, that kind of letter writing paper. It's pretty hard to read now because it's, especially if something's underneath it. So that sort of separates it with the sleeves. And postcards, anything else that's two-sided into sleeves or binders. They make archival boxes for oversized items. For that client in particular, I don't know how big that box is. It's got to be like 3 feet by 2 feet, because there are items in there. There's my client's great-grandmother's birth certificate is really big, like it's huge. And so it's in a sleeve in the box and protected and we put all the big, huge things in that one box. So, and I'll talk a little bit about keeping track of that, how we kept track of it all in a minute, but it's just, the containers need to be archived, and you want it, and in particularly if you're storing, say it's, if your postcards, say you've got real photo postcards, I'm putting my real photo postcards with the person they belong to. And so they're going to be with the photos. So I want to isolate that postcard and its lignin and acid from the photographs. So, and that's what I came up with for how to organize. It depends on what you're organizing. If it's the first thing I would do is let's go back to by person. Is if it's letters or the real postcards, certificates, business cards, I would organize those that belong to someone in your family just as you would the photos of the person. If it's or by event, like if it's trip memorabilia, concert memorabilia, I've run into quite a bit of that, where you've got the tickets and the programs and photos. It's another one. Concerts, those things. And how we keep track of this stuff. So, like, for example, the big birth certificate is by numbering the items and connecting the items with what it matches with. And I discovered this in the Kathy's Corner workflow checklist under the permanent storage container tab. You can see how this is, and it's a copy of a document. It's called the provenance that archivists use, and so it includes where did we find this, and what, the approximate date, the condition of it, and other information, but it's all numbered and it's marked so that the birth certificate is in container number such and reference back and forth so that it can be tracked down. You could organize by theme, history, if you've got a lot of items of history that aren't necessarily connected to people, by art objects, like the airplane ones, for example, by places. It kind of depends on what you're looking at the time and what it's relevant to. So, because I imagine there's people that have Life magazines or newspapers from the assassination of Kennedy, world events and things like that. Bill's got them, yeah. So that's always something that we can organize, sort of, that might just be part of our collection. So, and that's all I got for today. That's a quick look at archiving and preserving documents.
Wow. Well, in the time remaining, are there questions? That's a lot. Yeah, go ahead, Anne.
I have these silk brocade shoes that my grandmother wore in 1920.
Wow.
And I discovered them when we were cleaning out actually my sister's place where my mother had gone to live as she got older and she died. And this was the shoebox that it was in. And it just has Licenza tissue in it. So what do you do with physical things? I also have
I attended a whole seminar with Archival Methods on clothing and clothing and shoes and things, because that's part of our collections. And they make boxes, specific archival quality boxes of tissue.
Oh, good. Okay.
Storing those kind of items.
Although
take a picture of the shoebox, maybe not the Licenza tissue, but the shoebox. Because if that's the original shoebox.
My niece said to me, we were throwing everything in a bin, to get it taken away because we were selling the house, putting my sister into care. And my niece came over and went, "Are these important?" It's like, yes,
they are.
But I haven't done anything with them because, well, 1920, they've been, and that was my mother's shoebox, so they've been there a long time, but I don't want to leave them in there.
No, and that's the thing, is that probably for something like that, it's probably kept it relatively well, actually. But for permanent storage, you probably do want to put them in, and I think, tissue, and I don't think they put them in bags. I'm trying to remember. It was a long time ago. I took the one on storing clothing, but again, they have specific containers for clothing and tissue to wrap them in for things, even like big things like wedding gowns.
Would it be from the same place you mentioned in terms of
Archival Methods would be a place to look it up and then see what kind of containers they're using. Because I know Anne's another Canadian, so to see
so it's like, okay, gotta find it in Canada.
So.
Yeah, Archival Methods has textile storage kits.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a reason they're my go-to.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
I also found that they have a nice YouTube channel with procedures and things like that, which I think will be very helpful.
Yeah, good blog too.
But the blog is just
she's got a lot of blog links already. Yeah. A general question for you, since I've already interrupted here. How do you manage the better and the good? The best, the right thing. And when you talked about priorities and helping me feel a little less guilty, I think I may not be alone here with a few things that I'm feeling badly about. How do I prioritize that?
Well, I think and I'm not sure if you're talking about what to keep versus what to get rid of, or time, or what's
the effort to fix the problem.
The problem. Well, I think the first thing is to know what's really at risk. So if I had a bunch of photos in my basement, so they're not and when I found my mother-in-law's stuff in the storage unit, the first thing was to remove it from the storage unit and seal it up because of the mold in it until I could deal with it.
Mhm.
If you've got stuff in magnetic albums, it's deteriorating faster than the ones that are in the old paper albums, faster than the ones that are in shoe boxes. It's that sort of decisions. If you've got something that's moldy and it's not bothering you, like if you've got it secured so you're not inhaling the mold off it, it becomes less of a hurry because it's not going to unmold at any point. And so if it's wet and molding still, then we talked about that, then you want to freeze it because that'll stop mold from growing, but it doesn't kill the mold. So and then it becomes a question of space, like how much space do you have? And that's what is a big discussion right now with my client's daughter, because someday all this will be hers. And she doesn't have a whole house to keep it in. Like she doesn't have a vacant home that is a huge house to store all that stuff in anymore. So it becomes a question of what's most important. My yellow newspaper, I've decided what I've thought about with newspapers is old ones are cool when they're all yellowed and everything, but they really are deteriorating fast. But with newspapers.com, I'm almost inclined now to just get my digital articles and get rid of the paper because it's hard to store, takes up a lot of room, and it can easily be found online. You're never going to find, like, all you'll find online, maybe, Anne, is a picture of shoes similar to that. You're never going to find another shoe like, you're not going to find that anywhere. But my articles on the tornado in Edmonton, I have a whole book about the tornado in Edmonton. I have whole books about the flooding in southern Alberta in 2012, 2013. They're not going anywhere. They're not going to deteriorate that quickly. So also would depend on the age. Like I'm more worried now about getting properly stored these photos and kind of working back with what are my oldest photos and what do I need to do with them versus dealing with the stuff from the 70s, 80s, 90s, or early 2000s before I got digital camera,
So
because they're not going to deteriorate as rapidly um, as those old photos are not in as much need or aren't as irreplaceable. Because those later on photos, I've got like 8 copies of some of them, so it's not like
right.
it's a tragedy if one gets messed up. But and again, I think stuff you're trying that you still have to work on, like that big box. I'll post pictures. I'm going to put a little note up about, yay, I just found more stuff to do. Maybe I may make a video of sorting through it too, just for laughs. But it's um, it's it's in a plastic bin. It's not photo safe bin, but there's not a whole lot of pictures in there. I did find some pictures in it, but it's all paper and stuff in it. It's protected. It's on the second level of my house, so if we have a flood, it's not going to get flooded. There are no pipes running over my office, so it's, other than fire, it's relatively um, lower priority, say, than grandma's picture when she was 2 years old.
So it's like triage, save the
Triage. Yeah,
most
that's a good word
vulnerable
for it.
first,
Yeah,
those that are currently in danger with damage occurring, take care of them first, and then
yeah,
work your way backwards to the things that might be at risk given their current
yeah, yeah,
position or place or whatever else. So thank you. That made
yeah.
me feel a little better. I
Well,
think
and
all
I
those
just
pictures on the
something
wall
else
are all
is,
copies. They were once
yeah,
originals. They were once, fading. And it
yeah.
taught me just how bad it was.
Well, and it was like a good idea because one of the big things about anything we have of that is to be able to see it and
Mhm,
enjoy it, which is the
mhm,
other side of the thing is like you can lock everything safely away in nice archival boxes, but then do you ever get to look at it and see
mhm.
it and like go, wow, I'm holding grandma's shoe from the 1920s. Like we found in my client's stuff, this would have been her grandmother's who went to school in the US. We found her little, what do you call them down there, pep rallies that they used to have. A little hat she had because she was on the pep rally team, and a little sweater with the school crest on it. And we're looking at this and we're like, what is it? And then we realized she was a very tiny lady when she went to school. But those are like, she went to school in the 20s. So so those are something that we immediately, and sometimes temporary is good too. So things like that, what we immediately did is I have big pile all the time of my polyethylene bags from Archival Methods, and so I can just throw stuff in a bag until we figure out what's the final disposition of it. So we put those in a bag just so they were no longer sitting just in an old cardboard box, and got labels and what they were. Eventually, they were photographed for that to be preserved, and then it's in the whole stuff that is going to be a tough decision for this client because they've also got my client's mother and father both received honorary degrees. Her father got 2 honorary degrees. So, and their robes are in the house. So they're big. They're not tiny. They're big things, but it's like, wow. And it's quite remarkable because both of them were not born in Canada, and they came here in 1949 to work in the oil patch with Shell for 2 years, and ended up staying here until their deaths in the 2000s era. And were huge philanthropists. They did so much charity in the city that it's kind of a big deal that they got honorary degrees. Like, it's not just so, it's sort of
It's
like,
not just
and
that.
we have the degrees and we have the photos of the ceremonies, but it's like, yeah, do you really want to? And things, the granddaddy, it was granddaddy and Mima, their hats, because they were originally Texans. The hat that he golfed in all the time, they're huge golfers, and it's his golf hat. And it's like, that really triggers the memories of him because he wore that hat for more than golfing. He wore that brimmed hat all the time. And so it's things like that you sort of have to go, okay, this is really good. And the most important thing is that you indicate for whoever's coming after you that's going to get all this stuff what it is and what it's from. And I did a previous one because I know we have a link to it somewhere. I talked on a thing that a friend of mine, Marty McNabb, did from Show and Tales. And I talked about a ship in a bottle that I have. And after we did the recording and everything, and the ship in the bottle was made by German prisoners of war who were held in a prisoner of war camp in Kananaskis in World War II. And my grandfather was a guard there. And so we have some things because if you're in a prisoner of war camp in Canada and you're a German prisoner in World War II, you don't really bother to try and escape because you're pretty far from home. The camps were located in the Rocky Mountains. There weren't a whole lot of roads then. So prisoners escaped and just came back because they were like starving, and then they were like, yeah, no, I'm back. And so they actually did a lot of crafts. And my son, we needed a photo to go with the recording. And so I got my son to take a picture, and he goes, what is this anyway? And I was like, man, did I never tell you what this is? And it's, so now there's a recording of me talking about that. Would have been nicer if I could have got Grandpa to talk about it, but that ship sailed, so to speak. But I think it's a lot of tough decisions you have to make.
I think
And
there's
I think
something.
goes back those questions that I use all the time is, what do I want my future generations, what do I want them to have? What's important that they physically have? What do I want them to see, which then is a photograph enough of an object or a document? And what do I want them to know, which comes back to our whole reason for being at Project Ken is telling stories.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. Well, maybe that's a perfect place to end this, Kathy. That's really fantastic. Another incredible episode. I think this will be one that we will again be referring to in each of these categories because it sets the structure for the stuff that each of us has and the ways in which we are looking at both the physical objects and the digitized elements. You gave the examples of clothing, and your wonderful shoe is a perfect example. You could actually hold it right there, but to see size, photographs just don't tell us the size, the giant hat or whatever it might be. So I think everybody will join me in thanking you for this. And in the recording, feel free to drop the comments in here and share with those who may find this helpful. And we'll include links to other kinds of things. Feel free to drop links into the comments as well if there are, relevant pieces to share with everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you.
And we didn't get to talk much about RootsTech, so we'll just have to keep joining the RootsTech
We
ride
can
along.
we can also just take for a few minutes. I'm going to end the recording here, so we preserve this special moment, and everybody can stay online here on the live session, and we can chit chat a little bit about RootsTech. Hold on. Thank you.
Bye-bye.